What do you do when a letter from the grave hands you a legacy and a fight you never saw coming? I'm Tom Miller, and my life turned upside down the day I learned my grandfather's woods, a slice of Pine Valley's soul, were mine. But before I could set foot on that sacred land, a greedy HOA snatched it, building a mansion where my childhood memories stood. This is the story of how I fought to reclaim my granddad's land, not just for me, but for every generation yet to walk its paths, a battle that'd test my grit, uncover secrets, and change a town forever. It started with a rain-soaked envelope delivered to my cramped Chicago apartment on a dreary Tuesday in 2002. I was 32, an engineer grinding through 60-hour weeks, dreaming of a life less gray. The return address read, Pine Valley Legal Services, a name I hadn't heard since Granddad's funeral 5 years prior. Inside was a deed to 10 acres of woodland, his woodland, where we'd built forts and chased fireflies under a sky thick with stars. Holy hell, I muttered, coffee spilling on the counter as I traced the deed's seal. I owned land, real, wild land. My boss groaned when I asked for leave, especially with a 3-year contract looming in Singapore, but I had to see it before I left. The drive to Pine Valley took 6 hours, my old pickup rattling down roads that grew narrower, wilder, until a gravel path swallowed me into a cathedral of pines. A faded sign, in Granddad's blocky script, read Miller Land, Keep Out. Beyond it, the forest stretched untouched, oaks whispering secrets older than time, but on its eastern edge. Gleaming rooftops peeked through, Maple Ridge Heights, a ritzy neighborhood that screamed money. I hiked to the border, finding Granddad's survey markers, rusted stakes with faded yellow caps, just as he'd shown me at 10. An older man, pruning roses in a manicured yard, spotted me. "You James Miller's kin?" he called, wiping sweat from his brow. His name was Walt Peterson, a retired mechanic who'd known Granddad for decades. "Good man, your Granddad. Turned down developers more times than I can count." "Developers?" I asked, squinting at the mansions. "Maple Ridge HOA, Walt said, spitting the words. "Been eyeing your woods for years, more houses, maybe a country club. Watch out for Lorraine Baxter, their treasurer. She's got her sights on your land for her dream estate." He pointed to a gaudy colonial with gold-trimmed gates. 3 SUVs parked out front. "That's hers. She's trouble." I thanked him, my gut twisting. I wasn't selling. Granddad's land was more than dirt. It was his heart, his promise to keep it wild. But with Singapore calling, I hired a local firm to check the property monthly, figuring that'd hold the line. 3 years later, jet-lagged and hauling a suitcase through Pine Valley's dusk, I was ready to breathe that forest air again. What I found instead was a nightmare. The access path was blocked, a chain-link fence with a construction zone sign, the kind that screams trouble. I parked and trekked in from a side trail, the buzz of machinery growing louder. My heart stopped when I saw it. A sprawling mansion frame, half-built, sitting smack on my land. Workers hammered beams, and a woman in a tailored blazer barked orders, her auburn hair catching the sun, Lorraine Baxter. "Excuse me," I said, striding up, my voice tighter than I meant. "This is my property." She turned, her smile sharp as a blade. "And you are—" "Tom Miller. This is my grandfather's land. What the hell's going on?" Her eyes narrowed, but her tone stayed syrupy. "This parcel belongs to Maple Ridge Heights, Mr. Miller. Purchased legally last year. The boundary was clarified while you were away." She gestured to the skeleton of her mansion, already eating my woods. "My dream home's nearly done. Perhaps you should speak to our president, Victor Lang." I felt the ground shift under me. "I never sold this land, not a damn inch." Her laugh was cold. "Old surveys can be messy. We fixed it. Progress. You know." She turned back to her workers, dismissing me like I was nothing. I retreated, my pulse pounding. Something was rotten, and it wasn't just the sawdust in the air. That night, in Granddad's old cabin, I pored over his maps, their edges brittle but their lines clear. The GPS coordinates didn't lie. Lorraine's house was 150 feet past my boundary, as I dialed a surveyor. A text pinged from an unknown number. Leave it alone, or you'll regret it. My eyes flicked to the window, where construction lights blazed, carving my woods into someone else's dream. I wasn't just fighting for land. I was stepping into a war I didn't start. But as I'd soon learn, Granddad had left me more than acres. He'd left me a weapon to fight back. The Pine Valley woods were supposed to be my sanctuary. A piece of Granddad's soul I could hold on to after years of city grind. Instead, I stood in my grandfather's cabin, staring at maps that screamed betrayal, the glow of Lorraine Baxter's construction site mocking me through the window. That anonymous text, leave it alone or you'll regret it, burned in my mind. But I wasn't backing down. This wasn't just about 10 acres. It was about honoring a promise to a man who'd taught me the land was a trust, not a trophy. As I dug for answers, I'd uncover a plot dirtier than the sawdust covering my woods, and a spark of hope that'd light my fight. Sleep was a lost cause that night. I spread Granddad's maps across the cabin's oak table, their creases worn from decades of his calloused hands. The GPS coordinates were unmistakable. Lorraine's mansion sat 150 feet inside my boundary, a concrete dagger in the heart of my land. I called a surveyor, Ed Callahan, a grizzled local who'd worked with Granddad in the 70s. Emergency job, I said, offering double his rate. I need proof by tomorrow. Ed grunted agreement, promising to meet me at dawn. The next morning, under a sky heavy with clouds, Ed's truck rattled up. We hiked to the border, his laser equipment glinting as he measured. Your markers were moved. Tom, he said, pointing to fresh dirt around the stakes. Someone dragged him east, fudged the line. This house is on your land, every damn beam. His report, printed on site, was ironclad. The HOA's clarified boundary was a lie. As Ed packed up, he glanced at Lorraine's site, where workers swarmed like ants. Maple Ridge plays dirty. My cousin lost a field to them in '98. Watch your back. Fury churned in my gut, but I needed more than a survey. I drove to the county records office, a squat building smelling of dust and coffee. The clerk, Martha Grimes, had known Granddad and greeted me with a hug. "What's got you so pale, Tommy?" she asked. I showed her the deed and Ed's report. Her eyes narrowed as she typed. "This ain't right," she muttered. "Says here your Granddad filed a boundary change in 2001. He was gone by then." My blood ran cold. Someone had forged his name. A betrayal that felt like spitting on his grave. "Who filed it?" I pressed. "Maple Ridge HOA, through a firm called Horizon Surveys. Never heard of them." Martha printed a copy, her hands shaking. "Be careful, Tom. These folks don't lose easy." Back at the cabin, I called Victor Lang, the HOA president Lorraine had name-dropped. His voice was smooth, like a car salesman's, when he agreed to meet the next day. "Noon, my place," I said, hanging up before he could argue. That night, the construction noise doubled, saws screaming, floodlights searing my windows. I found a brick on my porch, a note tied to it. Last chance, Miller. My security camera, installed that morning, caught a shadow slipping away, too blurry to ID. This was no bluff. They were coming for me. Noon brought Victor's Mercedes crunching up my drive, flanked by Lorraine in stilettos and a young lawyer, Ethan Cole, clutching a briefcase. The cabin felt smaller with them inside, their designer cologne clashing with the pine-scented air. I laid out the deed, maps, and Ed's survey. "You built on my land," I said, voice steady. "Tear it down." Victor's smile was all teeth. "A clerical error. Tom, our survey last year fixed an old mistake. Lorraine's house is legal." He slid a check across the table, $200,000. "Take this, and we'll call it square." I pushed it back. "Granddad said no to your kind for 40 years. So do I." Lorraine's laugh was sharp. "You're nobody here. Miller, we own this town. Courts, council, all of it. Sell, or we'll bury you in lawsuits." Ethan chimed in. "Litigation's costly, Mr. Miller, and lengthy." "Bye." "So's rebuilding a house you put in the wrong damn place," I shot back. They left in a huff, Lorraine's heels catching in the gravel as their cars peeled out. Walt Peterson appeared, his face grim. "Heard they trashed my old shed last night," he said. "Claimed it was on their land. They're testing you." "Tom." I nodded, my resolve hardening. The HOA thought they could bully me into submission. But they didn't know what Granddad had hidden in his lockbox. A secret that had turned their world upside down. As I headed to the attic to find it, I knew this fight was about to get uglier. The Pine Valley woods were more than my grandfather's legacy. They were a battlefield. And I was losing ground fast. Lorraine Baxter's mansion loomed on my stolen land, its lights taunting me through the cabin's windows, while the HOA's brick-thrown threat echoed in my head. "Last chance, Miller." Victor Lang and his cronies thought they could scare me off with forged surveys and deep pockets. But they didn't know what I'd found in Granddad's attic, a weapon sharper than any lawsuit, one that had flipped their world upside down. As I dusted off his secrets, the fight took a turn I never expected, pulling me deeper into a war where the stakes were higher than 10 acres. The attic smelled of cedar and thyme, its floorboards creaking under my weight as I pried open Granddad's lockbox, a steel relic he'd kept hidden since I was a kid. Inside wasn't just the deed or maps I'd expected, but a yellowed contract from 1968, its ink faded but legible. Granddad had sold electrical easement rights to Maple Ridge Heights' original developer, with a clause, any transfer of those rights required offering them first to his heirs at a fixed price. My jaw dropped. The HOA's power grid, their gleaming mansions, depended on my family's permission. Granddad hadn't just owned the land, he'd held their lifeline. I called Martha Grimes at the county records office, my voice shaking. "Martha, those easement rights, where are they now?" Her keyboard clacked. "Sunbelt Power bought them in 71, but they restructured in 99. Those rights are in limbo. Tom, anyone can buy them back, and that clause says you get first dibs." I hung up, heart racing. This was my leverage, but it had cost everything, my savings, my retirement. As Lorraine's crew felled another oak, its crash shaking the cabin, I knew I had no choice. I drove to Sunbelt's regional office, a sterile building off the highway. The rep, a young guy named Carl, blinked at my request. "Nobody's touched those rights in decades," he said, pulling files. 6 hours later, I drained my accounts, $82,000, every penny I had, to own the electrical easement rights to Maple Ridge Heights, in my truck, clutching the signed papers. I felt like Granddad was riding shotgun, his gravelly voice whispering, "Hold the line, Tommy." Back home, I found Walt Peterson on my porch, his face ashen. "They're at it again," he said. "Cut down your granddad's oak grove last night. Said it was hazardous. I saw Lorraine there, smirking." I gripped the easement papers, fury boiling. The grove, where Granddad taught me to carve whistles, was gone, sawdust and stumps in its place. I confronted the foreman, who flashed a permit signed by Victor. "HOA orders," he shrugged. "Talk to them." That evening, a cream-colored envelope slid under my door, an invitation to Lorraine's housewarming gala, with a note in her looping scrawl, "See what you've lost. Miller, progress waits for no one." My lawyer, Dana Mitchell, a sharp-eyed woman who'd known Granddad, warned me off. "It's a trap, Tom. They'll provoke you." But I had to see how far they'd desecrated my land. I ironed my only suit, tucked the easement papers in my jacket, and drove to the Lion's Den. Lorraine's mansion blazed like a beacon, chandeliers casting light across a lawn packed with Pine Valley's elite, mayor, councilman, even a judge. She greeted me with a viper's smile, her emerald dress glinting. "Tom, so glad you crawled out of your shack," she purred, steering me to a patio that sprawled 40 feet onto my property. "Lovely, isn't it? The HOA fixed that pesky boundary error." Guests sipped champagne, eyeing me like a sideshow. Victor joined us, his Rolex flashing. "Let's bury the hatchet. Tom, name your price." I smiled, calm as a snake. "I made an investment today. Bought the electrical easement rights to your little kingdom." Their faces froze. "Check the records," I said. "And while you're at it, look at my survey. Your patio's on my land. Lorraine's laugh was brittle. You're bluffing. Nobody buys utility rights. Victor pulled her aside, whispering furiously as guests sensed blood in the water. A woman in a pearl necklace, Eleanor Hayes, a Maple Ridge old-timer, caught my eye. Her nod subtle but firm. I left the party, Lorraine's voice trailing. You'll regret this. Miller. In my truck. I saw her security lights flicker, like the land itself was winking at me. I'd drawn blood, but the HOA wasn't done. As I planned my next move, a new threat was brewing, one that'd test whether Granddad's weapon was enough to win this war. I'd thrown a match into the Maple Ridge Heights powder keg, and the explosion was coming. Owning the electrical easement rights to their gilded neighborhood gave me a weapon, one I'd unveiled at Lorraine Baxter's gaudy housewarming, leaving her and Victor Lang pale as ghosts. But the flickering lights I'd seen as I left, almost like the land cheering me on, were just the start. The HOA wasn't about to roll over. They'd fight dirtier than ever, and a secret I'd uncover would make this war personal in ways I never imagined. With Granddad's woods bleeding under their saws, I was ready to pull the plug, literally. The morning after the gala, I met Dana Mitchell, my lawyer, at a diner on Pine Valley's edge, the kind of place where locals swapped gossip over burnt coffee. You've got their attention, Tom, Dana said, sliding a folder across the table. But Victor's brother-in-law is Judge Harlan, and Lorraine's got the mayor on speed dial. They'll bury you in red tape unless you act fast. The folder held my easement papers and a draft notice, 30 days to remove Lorraine's mansion, or I'd authorize maintenance that had cut power to their grid's northeast corner, 5 houses, including hers and Victor's. Send it, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my chest. Certified mail, every board member. Dana nodded, but her eyes flicked to the window, where a black SUV idled across the street. They're watching, Tom. Be ready for blowback. Blowback came swift and ugly. That afternoon, I found my mailbox smashed, a scrawled note inside, "You're done, Miller." Walt Peterson called, his voice tight. They sent a crew to my place. Tom said my fence violates new guidelines, tore it down in an hour. I raced to his yard, finding splintered wood where his hand-built cedar fence had stood. Walt, eyes red, clutched a photo of his late wife, who'd planted roses along that fence. They're punishing anyone close to you, he said. I gripped his shoulder, guilt gnawing at me. At the cabin, I pored over Granddad's lockbox again, hoping for more ammunition. Tucked behind the easement contract was a letter, dated 1972 from a man named Henry Lang, Victor's father. James, it read. I'm sorry for the developer's pressure. Your woods are a treasure. If my boy Victor joins them, stop him. He's got my greed, but not my heart. My breath caught. Victor wasn't just an HOA suit. He was continuing a family betrayal. One Granddad had fought decades ago. This wasn't just my war. It was personal. I called Julio, my contact at Sunbelt Power, and finalized the maintenance order. You sure, Tom? He asked. This'll hit hard. I pictured Granddad's felled oaks, Walt's broken fence. Do it, I said. At 9 a.m. the next day, I stood on my porch, watching Maple Ridge's northeast corner. One by one, lights winked out, Lorraine's mansion, Victor's colonial, 3 others. Silence fell, broken only by distant curses. My phone erupted. Victor's voicemails, venomous texts from unknown numbers, even a plea from Lorraine's husband, Carl, begging for his kids' sake. By noon, news vans clogged the HOA office lot. Tanya Winters, a reporter with a nose for corruption, knocked on my door. Tom Miller, heard you shut down Maple Ridge's power. Care to talk? I showed her the deed, Ed's survey, and Henry's letter, laying out the forgery and theft. Her eyes gleamed. This is bigger than one house. I'm digging into their records. As she left, Eleanor Hayes drove up, her silver hair glinting. You've stirred the hive, Tom, she said. Half the neighborhood's furious. At the HOA, not you. Come to the board meeting tonight. It's time to face the music. I nodded, feeling the weight of Granddad's letter in my pocket. Victor and Lorraine thought they'd crush me, but they'd woken a sleeping giant, their own community. As I prepared for the showdown, a new ally was about to change everything. The Maple Ridge Heights blackout was my line in the sand, a jolt that left Lorraine Baxter's mansion and Victor Lang's colonial dark and silent. I'd turned Granddad's hidden easement rights into a sledgehammer, but the HOA wasn't down yet. They were coiling for a counterstrike. Eleanor Hayes's cryptic nod at the gala and her call to face the board meeting had lit a spark of hope. But I was walking into a lion's den, armed only with truth and Dana's legal savvy. What I didn't expect was an ally who'd turn the tide, exposing a crack in the HOA's armor that'd shake Pine Valley to its core. As I stepped into that packed community center, I wasn't just fighting for my land, I was fighting for Granddad's soul. The Maple Ridge Community Center buzzed like a hornet's nest, standing room only with residents clutching flashlights, their power still off. Dana and I took seats near the front, my folder of evidence, deed, survey, Henry Lang's letter, heavy in my hands. Victor stood at the podium, his tie askew, trying to look composed. Lorraine was absent, a void that whispered trouble. "Order," Victor barked, his voice cracking. "We're here to address a property dispute." Eleanor Hayes rose, her silver hair catching the lantern light. "Call it what it is, Victor. Land theft." The crowd gasped. "I've lived here 25 years, and I'm done with your schemes. Tom's land was stolen, and you knew it." She held up a faded ledger, her hands steady. "This is the HOA's 2001 budget. It shows a $50,000 payment to Horizon Surveys, the same outfit that faked Tom's boundary change. Care to explain?" Victor's face drained of color. "That's irrelevant," he stammered. But the room erupted, residents shouting questions. Dana leaned close. "Eleanor's our ally. Tom, she's been digging for years." I glanced at Eleanor, who winked. A fighter in pearls. Her ledger was a bombshell, proof the HOA had bribed their way onto my land. A new voice cut through the chaos. Clara Wilson, a retired teacher whose farm bordered Maple Ridge. "I lost 2 acres to your surveys in '99, she said, her voice steel. "Same story, forged papers, threats. Tom's not alone." The crowd turned on Victor, their murmurs now a roar. Dana stood, sliding our demands across the table: dismantle Lorraine's house in 60 days, restore the boundary, pay for the Oaks, and issue a public apology. "You've got no leverage," she said. "The law's with us, and so's the truth." Victor's lawyer, Ethan Cole, scrambled. "This affects only one parcel. The community's safe." But Clara's revelation had lit a fuse. A man in a flannel shirt, Pete, a mechanic, yelled, "What else you hiding? Lang, my garage permit got denied last year, but your buddy's pool sailed through." The room exploded again, and Victor's control slipped like sand. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. Lorraine burst in, her makeup streaked, clutching a manila envelope. "Enough!" she screamed, slamming it on the table. "Victor, you lied to me. This is the real survey. Your brother-in-law's firm buried it." She turned to me, eyes wild. "I didn't know. Miller, I thought the land was ours." The crowd fell silent, stunned. Victor lunged for the envelope, but Eleanor snatched it, revealing a 2001 survey matching mine, proof the HOA knew the truth all along. "Lorraine's flipping," Dana whispered. "She's saving her skin." I stared at Lorraine, torn between disbelief and a flicker of pity. Victor's resignation came an hour later, forced by a board vote led by Eleanor. The agreement was signed, 60 days to tear down. Granite markers, reparations. But Lorraine's betrayal hung heavy. As we left, Tanya Winters, the reporter, caught me outside. "This is going national. Tom, you've cracked their empire." I drove home, Henry Lang's letter burning in my pocket. Lorraine's turn was a victory, but the fight wasn't over. Clara's story and Eleanor's ledger had opened a Pandora's box, and I was about to learn just how deep the HOA's rot went. The Maple Ridge Heights board meeting had cracked open a fault line, with Lorraine Baxter's betrayal and Eleanor Hayes's ledger exposing the HOA's dirty secrets. Victor Lang's resignation was a victory, but Clara Wilson's story of her stolen farm and Tanya Winters' promise of a national expose told me this war was bigger than my 10 acres. Granddad's woods, scarred by Lorraine's mansion, demanded justice. And Henry Lang's letter, proof of a generational feud, burned in my pocket. As I drove home under a starless sky, I thought the fight was turning my way, but what I'd uncover next would show just how deep the HOA's rot ran, and a ghost from Granddad's past would change everything. Back at the cabin, I found a note taped to my door, handwritten in shaky script. Meet me at the old mill, midnight. I know what Victor's hiding. A friend. My gut screamed trap, but Dana's voice echoed. Truth was my weapon. I grabbed Granddad's old flashlight and headed to the mill, a crumbling relic by the creek where he'd once worked. The air was thick with moss and memory, the mill's wheel long still. A figure stepped from the shadows, Martha Grimes, the county clerk, her face pale under a wool cap. "Tom," she whispered. I couldn't say this at the office. Victor's been bribing county officials since the 90s. Your granddad caught him once, in '75, nearly cost Victor his career. She handed me a photocopied ledger, its pages brittle. Found this in the archives, payments from Maple Ridge to Judge Harlan's campaign, disguised as consulting fees. Your land wasn't the first they stole, Clara's farm, Pete's lot, half a dozen others. My hands shook as I read. The HOA wasn't just greedy, it was a machine, with Victor as its oily heart. "Why now, Martha?" I asked. Her eyes glistened. "Your granddad saved my dad's job at the mill. I owe him. But Harlan's men are watching me. Burn this after you read it." I drove home, the ledger hidden under my seat, and called Tanya. "You want a scoop?" I said. "Victor's been buying judges," she whistled. "Send it over. I'm pitching this to CNN." But trouble was already knocking. At dawn, Walt Peterson banged on my door, his truck's windshield smashed. "They hit me again." "Tom," he said, voice breaking. "Spray-painted traitor on my garage. Said I'm next if I keep talking to you." Guilt clawed me. My fight was bleeding onto my allies. I hiked to the woods, needing to think, and found Lorraine's mansion being dismantled. Workers labeling beams under Eleanor's watch. She joined me, her eyes fierce. "The board's panicking," she said. "Victor's gone to ground, but his cronies are pushing a new zoning vote to seize your land legally. Tomorrow's council meeting's the real fight." I showed her Martha's ledger, and her jaw tightened. "This could bury them, Tom." "But Harlan's on the council. We need more." That afternoon, a package arrived, no return address. Inside was a grainy photo from 1975. Granddad, stern-faced, shaking hands with a young Victor Lang. Henry Lang beaming beside them. A note read, "Your grandfather forgave once. Will you?" My blood boiled. Victor wasn't just a thief. He'd betrayed Granddad's trust, and now he dared taunt me. I called Dana. "We're crashing that council meeting," I said, "and we're bringing hell with us." The HOA's empire was crumbling, but they'd fight to the last. As I prepared to face Judge Harlan and his puppets, a new player was about to step into the light, with a secret that had tipped the scales. Pine Valley's woods were a battlefield, and I was armed with more than Granddad's easement rights. Martha's ledger and a 1975 photo of Victor Lang's betrayal gave me a sword to cut through the HOA's lies. The council meeting loomed, a chance to stop their zoning vote and expose their rot. But Judge Harlan's shadow hung heavy. Eleanor Hayes and Clara Wilson were rallying the town, and Tanya Winter's news vans were circling. But the note with that photo, "Your grandfather forgave once, will you?" gnawed at me. I wasn't here for mercy. I was here for justice. As Donna and I walked into the council chamber, I didn't know a stranger from Granddad's past would flip the fight upside down, turning our war into a town's redemption. The Pine Valley Council chamber was a pressure cooker, packed with residents, reporters, and Maple Ridge elites sweating in their suits. Judge Harlan, Victor's brother-in-law, presided at the head, his gavel a scepter of control. Dana clutched our evidence, ledger, survey, Henry Lang's letter, as we faced a panel of councilmen, their ties too tight, their eyes dodging mine. Victor sat in the front row, his face a mask, Lorraine beside him, her gaze fixed on the floor. The zoning vote to seize my land was first on the agenda, and Harlan's smirk said it was a done deal. Eleanor stood, her voice clear as a bell. "This vote's a sham," she declared, holding up Martha's ledger. "Maple Ridge bribed Horizon Surveys to steal Tom Miller's land, Clara Wilson's farm, and more. Here's proof, $50,000 to fake boundaries, plus payments to Harlan's campaign." The crowd roared, cameras flashing. Harlan banged his gavel, but Clara surged forward. "You took my family's orchard," she shouted. "My dad died fighting your lies. How many others? Harlan?" Victor leaped up. "Slander. This is a private dispute," but his voice drowned in the crowd's fury. Dana slid our documents to the council, her tone ice cold. "The law's clear. Forged surveys, bribery, theft, stop the vote, or this goes to federal court." Harlan's eyes flicked to Victor, a silent plea, but the room was slipping from their grip. Then came the twist that stopped my heart. A man in a faded denim jacket rose from the back, his face weathered like old leather. "I'm Amos Reed," he said, voice rough but steady. "Worked the mill with James Miller in '62. He saved my life when the beam fell, and I owe him." He held up a notarized affidavit, its seal glinting. "In '75, I saw Victor Lang bribe a surveyor to grab James's woods. James let it go, made Victor swear to stop. I kept quiet, shamed by my silence. No more." The chamber fell silent. Amos's words a thunderclap. Tanya's camera zoomed in, and Harlan's gavel froze midair. "This is inadmissible," he sputtered. But Amos handed the affidavit to a councilwoman, who read it aloud, her voice trembling. "Victor Lang paid $5,000 to alter James Miller's boundary. I witnessed it." Victor slumped, his mask shattered, as Lorraine buried her face in her hands. Eleanor seized the moment. "Motion to table the zoning vote," she called. The council, spooked by the crowd and Tanya's live feed, voted 4-2 to halt it. Harlan stormed out, Victor trailing him like a whipped dog. Outside, Amos gripped my arm. "Your granddad believed in second chances, Tom, but he'd be proud you didn't back down." I nodded, throat tight, the weight of his words sinking in. The vote was dead, but the HOA's machine wasn't. As I left, Tanya pulled me aside. "Found a paper trail, Tom. Victor's bribes go beyond Pine Valley, state level. You ready to take this higher?" I glanced at the woods, their shadows calling. Granddad's fight was alive, and I was just getting started. The Pine Valley Council chamber had burned with truth. Amos Reed's affidavit and Eleanor Hayes's ledger shattering the HOA's zoning grab. Victor Lang was a broken man. Judge Harlan's gavel silenced. And Tanya Winter's cameras were beaming our fight to the nation. But her words, "Victor's bribes go beyond Pine Valley," rang in my ears as I walked the scarred earth where Lorraine Baxter's mansion once stood. Granddad's woods whispered for healing, but the fight wasn't over. The HOA's ROT had roots in state offices, and a secret buried in my land soil would make this battle bigger than I'd ever dreamed. As I braced for the next blow, an old wound would reopen, demanding I choose between vengeance and redemption. Dawn broke over the cabin, the air heavy with sawdust and hope. Workers, under Eleanor's iron gaze, carted away Lorraine's last beams, granite markers now guarding my boundary like sentinels. Walt Peterson joined me, his truck's new windshield glinting. "They're quiet now," he said, nodding at Maple Ridge. "But I heard Victor's meeting state suits in Raleigh. Tanya's onto something big." I showed him the 1975 photo of Victor and Granddad, the taunting note still stinging. "He betrayed my granddad. Walt, I can't let that go," Tanya called, her voice electric. "Tom, I traced Martha's ledger. Victor's payments hit a state senator's PAC, Senator Grayson, Harlan's old law partner. They've been greenlighting land grabs across 3 counties. Your case could crack it wide open." My pulse raced. This wasn't just my woods, it was a syndicate. "Meet me at the state archives tomorrow," she said. "Bring everything." Before I could plan, Clara Wilson arrived, her face grim. "Found something. Tom, on your land." She led me to a clearing where the mansion's foundation had been dug up. Half buried in the dirt was a rusted ammo box, etched with JM 1960. My hands trembled as I pried it open. Inside were Granddad's dog tags, a photo of him with a young girl, and a letter. "To my daughter, Ellie. If you find this, I hid it to protect you. The Langs tried to take our land in '60. I fought, but it cost us. Forgive, but don't forget. Ellie, Eleanor Hayes, Granddad's secret daughter, my aunt. I drove to Eleanor's, the box rattling beside me. She opened the door, saw the dog tags, and froze. "Where'd you get those?" she whispered. I showed her the letter, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "He never told me," she said. "I was adopted out after Mom died. Found out James was my dad in '80, but he was gone." Her voice hardened. "Victor knew. Used it to keep me quiet all these years." The twist hit like a freight train. Eleanor wasn't just an ally. She was family. And Victor's blackmail was another knife in Granddad's back. We met Tanya at the Raleigh Archives, a cavern of dusty files. She unearthed a 1999 contract linking Victor, Harlan, and Grayson to a shell company that reassessed rural boundaries. "This is fraud on a state scale," Tanya said. "Your land's the spark, Tom." But danger was closing in. That night, my cabin's windows shattered, a Molotov cocktail fizzling on the porch. A note read, "Drop it or burn," Dana called. Urgent. "Grayson's pushing an emergency land seizure law. We've got one shot, testify at the state hearing in 2 days." Eleanor gripped my hand. "For James, Tom, for all of us." The woods, my family, and Pine Valley were counting on me as I prepared to face the state's lions. A final piece of Granddad's legacy was about to surface. Redefining the fight. Ever had someone grab something so sacred it's like they stole your family's soul? That's what hit me when the Maple Ridge Heights HOA grabbed my granddad's land, thinking they could bury James Miller's legacy under Lorraine Baxter's mansion. I'm Tom Miller, and this is how I crushed their lights and fought to restore the soul of those Pine Valley woods, not just for me, but for Eleanor, my secret aunt, for Clara, Walt, and every soul the HOA crushed. The state capitol hearing was my last stand, where Granddad's final secret would ignite a reckoning, teaching me that justice isn't just winning, it's healing what's broken. The Raleigh State House was a marble colossus, its halls echoing with power and secrets. Dana, Eleanor, and I stood before a Senate committee, Tanya Winter's cameras rolling as Senator Grayson's land seizure law hung in the balance, Martha's ledger, Amos Reed's affidavit, and Tanya's paper trail linking Grayson. Victor Lang and Judge Harlan to a decade of fraudulent land grabs sat heavy in my briefcase. The Molotov cocktail's scorch marks on my porch still burned in my mind. But Eleanor's hand on my shoulder, her dog tags gleaming, steadied me. "For James," she whispered. I testified first, voice steady. Maple Ridge stole my grandfather's woods, faked surveys, and bribed officials. They didn't just take my land, they took Clara Wilson's orchard, Pete's lot, and countless others. Here's proof. I slid the ledger and affidavit forward, the committee's eyes widening. Clara followed, her voice cracking as she spoke of her father's death under HOA pressure. "This law lets thieves like Grayson win," she said. Eleanor closed, revealing her lineage. "James Miller was my father. Victor blackmailed me to stay silent. No more." The room held its breath as Grayson, a silver-haired shark, rose to defend his law. "This is a local dispute, exaggerated by malcontents," he sneered, but Tanya stood, holding a bombshell, a leaked email from Grayson to Harlan, dated 2000, planning to streamline rural boundaries for profit. "Senator, care to explain?" she asked, her feed live to millions. Grayson stammered, his empire crumbling as the committee chair, a grizzled farmer named Senator Holt, banged his gavel. "Law's dead. Investigation's open." The twist came as we left the chamber. Walt Peterson, waiting outside, handed me a small journal, its leather cracked. "Found it in your granddad's old mill locker," he said. "Thought you'd want it." Inside was Granddad's handwriting, a 1980 entry. "Planted a seed in the woods, a chestnut tree, for Ellie and Tom. If they find it, they'll know the land holds our heart. Protect it, always." My throat tightened. Granddad's final secret wasn't a weapon. It was a promise. A tree tying me to Eleanor and the future. back in Pine Valley. The woods bloomed with renewal. Lorraine's mansion was gone, its materials repurposing a community center under Eleanor's leadership. Now, HOA president. Volunteers replanted oaks, and Clara led a conservation trust, funded by HOA fees I'd mandated when selling back the easement rights. Victor faced indictment, his Raleigh ties severed. Lorraine, humbled, approached me at the replanting ceremony. "I was wrong, Tom," she said, eyes down. "I sold my other properties to pay for this." I nodded. No words needed. Her shame was punishment enough. Years later, I built a bench by Granddad's chestnut tree, now 20 feet tall. Its branches a canopy for my niece, Lily. "Tell the story, Uncle Tom," she'd say, chasing fireflies. I'd recount how the HOA grabbed our granddad's land, how I crushed their lights, and how we restored its soul. The lesson, for anyone who's felt life's scars, is clear: fight for what lasts. Watching Lily laugh, I knew the woods would outlive me, carrying Granddad's heart, Eleanor's courage, and Clara's grit into tomorrow. The land remembers, in every root, every leaf, every story shared.